Welcome to That's Why We're Friends,
the podcast where we laugh a lot, talk about real life, and hold on to faith through it all.
We're two friends navigating the oldish season of life and celebrating the kind of friendships that make it all a little easier.
So whether you're feeling overwhelmed, hopeful, or just need a laugh, this podcast is for you.
Pull up a chair and join the conversation. Hey, Kara.
Hey, Sarah.
Do you know what makes life just a little sweeter?
No, what?
Pie. And our friend Amy over at Buttermilk Sky Pie Shop knows how to do pie right. From the classics like pecan and apple to their famous southern custard, every bite tastes like home.
And here's the best part. Right now, Amy is giving our listeners a special deal. Use the code PODCAST, that's all caps, podcast, to get $5 off any full-size pie order now through November 15th.
Thanksgiving is coming up, so whether you're gathering with family, celebrating with friends, or maybe you just need a little something sweet for yourself, head over to Buttermilk Sky Pie Shop and let Amy take care of dessert.
Because life's too short not to enjoy pie. Again, that's $5 off any full-size pie with code PODCAST, but only until November 15th. Don't miss it. Hey, Sarah.
Hey, Kara.
How's it going?
It's going really well.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to continuing our amazing conversations for October and enjoying the, somewhat seasonal changes. We're still in that weird time in Texas where things, kind of change and then don't change, but I still enjoy it. I love this time of year. It's my favorite.
Me too. I do. I like the change, and I've been really feeling the pumpkin spice stuff. You asked me if I was a pumpkin spice fan, and man, all of a sudden, I don't know if you asking me about it is what kind of triggered it for me or what, but I've been drinking and eating all the pumpkin things.
I like it.
And I'm loving it.
So I triggered you in a good way.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I feel like food's always good. I've never met a food that was bad.
No, we like food on this podcast.
We definitely do.
It's not a food podcast, but we talk about food a lot.
We do talk about food. I think we've talked about food on every episode.
And that's going to continue today.
It is actually going to continue today. That's right. Yeah.
Because we have somebody with us.
We do.
Hanging out again. Yeah. We're super excited to have the lovely Amy Hardin with us. And to give you guys a little bit of information about Amy, for those of you who don't know, she and her husband, Wade, have been married for 6 years, and they have 3 girls together. So it's Wade and all the girls. Which,
that's right.
Yes, means he's super blessed.
That's right.
And then just a little background on you. So you are a retired police officer. You were a police officer in Arlington, Texas for 20 years. And I didn't know this part until recently, but you were on patrol for 15 years, and then you were a detective for 5 years. Yes. And so this is not a Law and Order themed podcast either, but I so want to talk to you now separately just about all the detective stuff, because I've had lots of conversations with you, and if I had known, it's probably better because we might not be friends anymore because I may have just annoyed you so much, but that just fascinates me, just with the Law and Order and the detective stuff. So
but it's
that's
not
very cool.
It's not as glamorous as we think.
That's what people are always more impressed by, the detective side, and the detective is really, TV has made that very glamorous because it's usually reading reports in a cubicle, whereas patrol is that's where my heart was and where I loved and just had a blast, because you're chasing after people and you're answering 911 calls. And that's all you're doing all day. So that's a lot more fun.
Well, we can talk more about that later. We won't bore the people with my Law and Order fascination. But then when you retired in 2020, you, and correct any details along the way, but had plans to go to culinary school and be a chef. And then you were at a baby shower where you had some key lime pie, and it was the best key lime pie you'd ever had in your whole life. So you used your investigative skills, though, I will say. This is where being a detective helped you to find a place called Buttermilk Sky Pie and go and visit. And then lo and behold, it's a franchise. And so you decided, well, we need a Buttermilk Sky Pie shop in our area. So you opened one, even though I thought this was an interesting fun fact. You had never baked a pie before. And so some of your people thought it was an interesting choice. Right. But it has been a great success and a super blessing to those of us in this room currently and many, many others. And so we just want to say welcome to you. And so as our listeners and readers know, we're kind of watchers. They could read the transcript. Maybe someone just really likes to read things. We've been talking about hard seasons, desert seasons. And so it's kind of one of those things like, oh, hard seasons, let's call Amy. And it's not that. It's more about, yes, you have walked through some hard things, but it's what you have allowed God to do in you and through you that's the inspiration for being here. And then we've been joking around all month and playing off the like dessert season versus desert season. Right. And so you check that box too. So it just couldn't have been more perfect. So welcome. We're
Thank you.
Very excited to have you with us today.
Yeah. When I told Wade that y'all had called me about overcoming hardships, I said, yeah, I have an A in that class. I got a good grade, and I know how much you love grades, so it was only fitting.
Okay, I don't know where this came from. I mean, I do know where it came from, but I don't know how it became a thing. Like a theme on the show.
Yeah, we're never going to let
grades.
That go.
Okay. It's fine. You're the perfect student, and I'm the one who can't say words right. It's all good. It's all fine.
True.
Yeah, Jeff this morning, he was like, what are y'all talking about on your podcast? And I told him you were coming, and he's like, oh, that's funny, like dessert and desert. And I was like, duh. We've already figured that much out. So it's good.
It's good. So there's two scriptures that have kind of been our anchor points for this month, because obviously we're talking about hard things, but we want to, obviously our faith is what drives us and anchors us. And so these two have kind of been our foundation. So do you want to share those?
Yeah. So in Romans 5:3-4 says, not only so, but we also glory in our sufferings, because we know that suffering produces perseverance, and perseverance character, and character hope. And then our other verse that we looked at was James 1:2-3 that says, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. And the thing that we talked about on our last couple of episodes is just like how those verses can almost make us bristle sometimes, when we're going through hard things, and like joy and hard is not something we really feel like we feel. But we've just talked about like the joy of actually knowing that Christ is in the middle of our circumstances. And so, we just want to kind of start off. I mean, we're just going to jump right into the deep end with you and get your backstory from you. You could tell us, some of the things you've been through. We each know, but we want everyone to hear, because you have an amazing testimony of how the Lord has just guided your steps throughout your life, even in times, I think I can fairly say that maybe you weren't looking to him, but he was there pursuing you.
Yeah. I had talked with Wade about how I really feel like where Satan attacked me the most was on my identity and just not knowing really what God thought about me or what he said about me was true. And so even from birth, I was adopted, like my parents adopted me. And so it was just immediately seeds of rejection were planted. And so I saw that as I grew up. I grew up in a Christian home, and I knew all about God and who God was. I went to church every Sunday. I was checking all the boxes. But just over the years, seeing how Satan used my identity being in question and just planting those seeds of rejection and having, even stuff silly as like little boyfriends in middle school breaking up with me, and just this constant feeling of not being wanted. And so seeking that in the wrong places, and just, really having a hard life because of a lot of those choices, and picking wrong spouses and seeing those turn into broken marriages, and the shame that comes with that. Because it was just like the more that happened to me, the more the enemy used that to say, yeah, look, I told you you weren't worth anything. And you see how this marriage didn't work. And that's because you weren't wanted. Nobody wanted you. So just a lot of hard, truths to overcome, that what I thought was true was not what was true at all. And really kind of discovering in the process of that who I was and like whom I belonged to. That was the biggest difference, I think.
Was there a time in your story as you look back at all, kind of, now looking back, you can sort of put puzzle pieces together, right? Was there a time that you feel like that the Lord really showed you your identity, or was it a process of things?
Probably more of a process, but I know where I see a dividing or like a line in the sand, right? Yeah. I was when I lost my mom. So I found out in 2013 in May that my mom, who lived 10 minutes from me, married to my dad for almost 50 years, was diagnosed with cancer. And my mother loved Jesus. She was always the person who pointed me to Jesus and would constantly, before the internet, when there was newspaper, cutting out devotionals and sending them to me. And she was just always that person for me. And I look back and realize that she really was my God. Like when things were hard, I would call her. When I needed a decision to make, I'd call her. And she didn't know that, of course, but now looking back, I realized that. And so when she got sick, I kind of thought the eternal optimist in me was like, oh, she'll do chemo and radiation and this could be years and I'm sure she'll beat it. And even if she doesn't, I still have a long time with her. And so in July of the same year, they told us that she was not going to make it and that she would be gone in about 2 weeks. And so, she went from being at my daughter's soccer game on a Saturday to being in the hospital on a Sunday and then weeks later dying. So that was the, very defining moment in my faith, because I think I realized then that I really didn't know God. And I know that's kind of what we have talked about is the difference of knowing about God and knowing God. And so for me, that's when I realized that I really didn't know God, because that hit me so hard and just knocked me back to where I really didn't think I would survive that. And just having to reach out to people that I knew loved the Lord and saying, I just need help. Like I need help to get through this because I don't know how.
Wow. I know that whenever we talked about on our last episode about my season last year, all the stuff that I went through and just how I had a day where I remember specifically saying either what I believed about God before this is true or it isn't. Like I'm picking the path or I am turning around and running. And so it sounds like that's kind of where you were. Like I feel like that God is true and that his ways are right, but I don't know how to get there. And so was there something that someone did or said that kind of helped you as you pursued his ways in your life?
Yeah, just even in that moment, like when because she was in the hospital the entire time until the last 2 weeks. Then she went home on hospice. And that time when she was in the hospital, I would work half a day and then I'd go sit with her for the other half. And I would be coming up the elevator. I'd get off, walk to her room, and I could hear her singing praise and worship songs. Oh, wow. And I mean, she was suffering. Like they were putting so much chemo and so much radiation because they didn't know where it started. They didn't know how to treat it. And so they were just giving her as much as they could. And I remember thinking, like, she's so joyful and I don't have that. Like, I would be so mad right now. My dad had just retired fairly recently and they had started to travel together. And, my brother and I were at a phase where our kids were young and perfect grandkid age to do stuff with my parents. And so it was really hard for it to be that timing. But just hospital staff coming up and saying, your mother has been such a joy to, love on and take care of. And so I saw something in her that I knew I didn't have. And I thought to myself, like, I'd be so mad if I were her. I'd be angry. I would be disappointed. And whenever they told us that, this is it, my dad said, Amy, don't go in there and try to convince her to stay and fight. Like, your mom's made the decision. And so go in there and like tell her you're okay with that. And so I walked into her room and I said, Mom, I just did not expect for you to die. Like, her mom lived to be 98. So, I mean, I just thought she would be around for forever, I guess. And I'll never forget, my mom said, Amy, did you think I would live forever? And I was like, yeah, I did. And she said, I've had a great life. Like, I've had a great marriage. I've raised 2 amazing kids. And I'm ready to go see Jesus. And like, so when she died, And I realized I didn't have that. I was actually attending the Village Church in Flower Mound, Texas. And I went in that Sunday. And I joke when I've told my testimony that never sit on the front row of a church when you're like sobbing your eyes out, because you quickly learn there's no tissue paper on the front row, because no one's in front of you. Sure. There's no like seat backs. So I walked in and I was like, I need to go to the very front. I never sat in the front, but I said, I need to go to the very front because I need to just be as close to Jesus and like the Lord as possible. And I just sobbed. I mean, ugly cry, snot coming out, sobbing. And when I was done with that service, I walked out and I found somebody on staff and I just said, I need help. Like, I don't know what to do. My whole world has been wrecked. And I was a single mom. My daughter was 8. And I just said, I'm so lost right now. And it really showed me that I really didn't know anything about God. I knew of God and I knew what I had learned in church. But as far as me having a savior to rely on and like knowing my Bible and knowing what it says about hard seasons and pursuing the Lord and having endurance in that, like I didn't have that because I didn't know God like that. And so they put me into a small group with this lady who at the time I joked, I think she was like 80, but I was also in my 30s. So I think she was probably like 50 or 60,
probably
probably now, but in the time, she has white hair. So I was like, oh, she's gotta be 80 or 90. Right. But her name was Helen. And I always say like, Helen will always have a special place in my heart because Helen was basically my mom. And same personalities, very much loved the Lord, loved her Bible. And so Helen really taught me to read my Bible and taught me how to understand my identity in Christ. And like, these are the things that God has said about you. Mm-hmm. And she gave me a piece of paper that I still have to this day. And it says, you are loved at the top of it. And then it lists every scripture in the Bible that says something about your identity. Mm-hmm. You are God's handiwork. You are beautifully and wonderfully made, just like all those scriptures. And I remember putting that on my wall and just reading through that every day to where I finally realized that is who I am. Like that's how in Christ, that's how the Lord sees me when he looks at me. And it changed everything about my life. I mean, that was the start of how I developed my relationship with the Lord. And like now I obviously know the Lord. I walk with him. I love him. I know he loves me. And so it's just shaped my life. And so I always say like in my darkest day was one of my finest days because my mom dying is what helped me find Jesus. And so
there's so much just incredible stuff in that. And I think it's such a great distinction to make of knowing about God versus knowing God. Because I think in this day and age, a lot of people would say they know things about God. Even just, I think you can pick stuff up in pop culture and media, and that doesn't mean it's all accurate. Right. But I think there are a lot of people who would say they know things about God or know, they know the name God or they know the name Jesus even and kind of know those stories. But it's so interesting to hear you describe like the difference between the two and that relationship piece. And so much of it involving, the things that you did. There was a lot of scripture and a lot of Bible reading, but it also really kind of changes the heart behind it. So it's not, because people can think, well, it's not about the things that we do and, checking boxes, and it's not, but we do those things because that's how we get to know him, because his word is his voice. His word is what he sounds like and how he speaks. And so you think about in any relationship, how we get to know each other is through conversation and through spending time together. So it's not these religious boxes that we check. It's, I want to know who he is. And so I want to know what he said and I want to know what he did. And the way we do that is through his word and then through the body, because in those relationships, people point us back to Christ and reveal new things. And so I just love that journey because I think so many people can relate to that, of either because of the way they grew up or just certain times they were exposed to knowing things. But it's those hard seasons, like we even see in scripture, why we can count it joy, why we can glory in our sufferings, because those can be the things that actually introduce us to him as a loving father. as a relationship that we can actually be a part of. And so it's just, it's beautiful the way you describe it. And I think so many people relate to that story and that transformation of, I knew who he was, but now I know him.
Well, and even growing up, I have vivid memories of my mom like sitting in her chair reading her Bible. And obviously as parents, we make mistakes or we don't do everything perfect, but I never knew what she was reading. I mean, she never talked to me about it. She didn't show me how to read my Bible. And so I remember being like, man, I want to be like her. And I'd open up my Bible and I'd look at it and I was like, this might as well be in Spanish. I said, it doesn't make sense to me. I don't get it. But I also didn't know how to read it. No one had ever taught me. Yeah. And I think growing up in like our generation, we didn't talk about your family, especially our parents. Like you weren't talking about feelings and, now how we talk about mental health so much. Those were never conversations. Right. So I would just see her reading it, but I didn't know how to read my Bible. And so that was one of the things that I loved about Helen, was that Helen actually, she loved scripture and she really set me down and showed me, okay, let's take this chapter of this book. And some of the Bible obviously isn't written about us, right? It's like explains kind of the history or the setting, but there's very much verses that are specifically meant for us. And that's what she said, you need to make this personal. Like, Amy, I am here for you. Amy, I will be there for you in deep waters, things like that then made it personal to me. And she talked to me about my prayer life, and she's like, do you pray? And I said, well, yeah, I pray. Of course I pray. I'm a Christian. I pray. And she's like, well, how do you pray? And it just caught me so off guard because I thought, I don't know. Hey, God, I need something, right? Like that was kind of what my prayer life was like. And then even thinking back to when my mom got sick, I never prayed for my mom to not be sick. I prayed that God wouldn't take her. I said, God, don't take my mom. It was very much commands given to God. And expectations of, my mom needs to be here and you don't need to take her. And so, I told Helen that I had a lot of guilt even about that. Like, why didn't I pray for her to get better, to be healed? Like, I just didn't pray like that. And that's when she kind of broke down that I don't really know Jesus. And she said, if you had a friendship where you never talked to that person, where you never sat down and spent time with that person, how good do you think that friendship would be? And I remember being like, not very good, right? Like, and so she said, I want you to start even just in your car, because at the time I was an officer. I worked in Arlington. That was about an hour commute. And so she said, I want you, when you get in your car, to just talk to God like he's sitting in your front passenger seat. And I remember the first time I did it, because I would have to leave my house at 4:30 a.m. Wow. So pitch dark outside. And I had this long street I lived on, and I would drive down it and I'd say, okay, God, like, don't know what we're going to talk about today. And it barely even made it to the end of that street. But I just kept doing it. And the more I did it, the more familiar I got with it. And it became more of, even though I couldn't audibly hear a voice, like I definitely could feel that he was with me and in my car with me. And so the first time I drove all the way to Arlington and talked to him the entire way, I didn't even realize it, and got to work and I was like, God, I just talked to you for like an hour. And so it just changed my relationship with him, because it just became real. It became tangible of something. I was like, people driving past me probably think I'm crazy because I'm talking to nobody. But thank goodness there's not too many people on the road at 4:30. Yeah. So, but yeah, that's what really developed my prayer life. And then now that I do have a relationship with the Lord and I know the Lord, I have conquered so much just through prayer, alone. That, and I mean, obviously not me conquering, the Lord with me conquering, but just seeing the power of prayer and how that's changed my walk so much, because I can pray for something like, what do I do after a retirement? And Lord, this is what I want to do. I want to go to culinary school. I want to be a private chef. Right after COVID or during COVID. So that would have never worked out. I would have never had any events for like 2 or 3 years
Right.
to do. So I'm thankful the Lord didn't push me in that direction and instead said, I want you to open up a pie shop. And that made no sense. I never had baked a pie, nothing. So everyone was like, how do you go from being a chef to being a baker and you don't bake? I was like, yeah, I know. It doesn't make sense. Like, thank goodness I know the Lord and this is what he's telling me to do. And just being faithful in that and opening it. And then later, like my dad coming to me and say, I owe you an apology. Like, you listen to what the Lord told you. And like, we see the fruit of that and it's doing well. And, you know, it's made a big difference like in the community and with people I've hired and just all the blessings that I've seen come from it. And I mean, that's how we met was in the Bible study of business owners. Yeah. So just things like that where I've seen God just bless me so much because of faithfulness in times where it didn't make sense, you know?
That's awesome.
So
it sounds like, I know for myself, years and years ago, my mom would always give the answer when the question was, what's your favorite book? My mom would say the Bible. And I always thought, that is such a cop-out answer. Why don't you pick a book, like a book, not the Bible, pick a book. But then I remember there was a point in my adulthood where I really wanted to read the Bible more and I wanted it to be inside of me so much more, but it was still confusing, even though I'd grown up in the church. Sounds like similar to you, you know. And so I started giving that as my answer so I would begin to believe it.
Wow.
And it sounds like with your identity piece and your prayer piece, you just had to start using the muscle to make it work. Yeah. And sometimes, and it's not like a fake it till you make it thing. It's more of just like, I want this. And I know that if I give up in the hard, I'm just going to go back to my old ways and I'm going to go back to the world. But you just kept pushing through on those things. And then you saw the fruit of what God brought to you through that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So that's amazing.
Because it's just like if you're training for a marathon, you know, I mean, you don't just show up to the marathon and run it. You've got to train and build that endurance. And for me, I knew that before my mom died, like I was miserable. If I really, you know, I looked like I was doing fine. And on the outside, I always was, people later were like, you always seem so happy and like you had it all together. And I was like, yeah, that was just a facade. Inside, I was a mess. Like my self-worth was a mess. My self-image was a mess. I hated who I was. I hated myself, like no peace, no joy. It was just a show, you know, because I didn't want people to know, like, you know, we live in a world where it's like, don't let people see you weak, you know, you've got to be strong. And I mean, I was a police officer, for Pete's sake. Like, we're supposed to be the toughest of the tough. And you have to separate emotions from reality because you're dealing with so much bad all the time that you really have to disassociate yourself. So I was just doing that in my personal life, you know. I'm like, oh yeah, the world's collapsing, and I'm like, we're good, you know. So it's just like learning that, no, I'm not good. And that's what I loved about at the Village Church. I got really plugged into their recovery program on like Wednesday nights. And a lot of people hear recovery and think, oh, it's for addiction and stuff. But their program is really for everybody. I mean, there's groups for like life issues. So if you struggle with anxiety or fear, you know, so I mean, we could all fall into those categories. But their little motto was, it's okay to not be okay. And that was the first time I think I had heard that. And so I was able to say, yeah, I'm not okay. I am not okay. My world is collapsing, you know, and my mom dying was like the final, you know, nail in that coffin of, I just cannot keep living like I'm living because this isn't working, you know, and all before that was all my effort to be better. I kept thinking, why can't I just be better? Why can't I just do the right thing? Why can't I just, it was all trying harder and striving, and just no wonder it didn't work. Like we were made to have a creator, like we were made to have a savior, and that hole in your heart that, you know, the world fills with everything but God. It's like that was meant for God, and you're never going to fill that until you fill that with God. And, you know, you hear about, oh, peace beyond understanding. And I remember thinking people are just kind of Jesus freaks. Like, remember when that was like a term we threw around? I'm like, oh, now I'm a Jesus freak. Like I would have been labeled as that. But that's how for me, really leaning into the Lord and just realizing, because you don't know what you don't know, right?
Yeah.
So once you figure out what people are talking about and you experience that joy in the middle of hard times, or you have peace when you shouldn't have peace according to the world, you're like, I get it. It's almost like the light comes on, and then you try to, you almost try to force it on people. Like, no, you have to find Jesus. This will be so much better. And I forget, like, no one shook me and made me figure that out. People tried. Right. But like when I look back at what was the defining moment, it was all in the way my mom lived her life. It had nothing to do with what she said to me. It had nothing to do with the newspaper clippings she sent to me. It was all in the moment that she was dying. I realized that she had something that I didn't, and I wanted that. That's and powerful. So that was my, like, whatever I have to do to get that, I'm going to do. And I've always been an athlete, so I've always like trained for stuff. And so to me, it was like I buckled down and I was like, I'm putting all my eggs in this basket and I'm going to do whatever I need to do. So I was like, I plugged into small groups and circles and Bible studies, and I met with Helen like one-on-one because I wanted, to figure out, what is this about? Like, why do I not know what other people know? Because I've been to church my whole life. Like, why is this not clicking? I think was the thing. And I'm like, I just need it to click. But that's when Helen's like, well, that's you just trying to strive to be better. I was like, dang it.
There's a difference.
Yeah. And she said, you just really need to work on having a relationship with the Lord.
Yeah.
And good. Once you have that, then everything else falls in place. So
take that. So, kind of going through that season with your mom, and, we talk about hard times. Sometimes it does involve physical struggles. And so you walk through that with your mom. But in your own life, in your own journey, there have been some physical pieces of that, those hard seasons with you, and just in recent years even. And so I'd love just to hear a little bit about what, now that you then had this time, these seasons with the Lord, growing deeper in that relationship, and then here comes this, physical struggle that you're now walking through. How have you experienced him and your faith now going through the things that you've kind of walked through physically the recent years?
Right. Yeah, it's my family jokes that I'm like a medical mystery, and we say that if anyone ever broke into our house, they would think Wade was married to like a 95-year-old woman, because my nightstand is like medicines and all this stuff. But in my 20s, I was diagnosed with lupus, and also with a connective tissue disorder. So it basically, my body hates itself is kind of the summary of that diagnosis, because I have like really bad muscle spasms and I can go into traction, and then lupus, I just have all sorts of complications with that. And so I have to take like 12 different medicines every day to just be functioning. And so I say I have a great team of doctors, and they are the ones who help me be able to do what I can do. But yeah, it's hard. A lot of people don't even know I'm sick. Part of autoimmune stuff is that it's not always visible. Now when I'm in traction and I'm all curled up and my muscles are completely stiff, it's obvious, like you can tell. But just really living life day to day, I'm always in pain. My body always feels like someone has me in between elevator doors and is just squeezing it as hard as they can. So I've lived with that now for almost 30 years. So there have been seasons where, based on stress in my life, it'll flare up worse. And so that is something that I tell people about. It's not like my mom died, I fell in love with the Lord, and then there's been no hardships after that. Mm-hmm. In fact, like right after my mom did, when they say don't make any major decisions within a year of something tragic, I got married, because I thought that was a great idea. And just married someone who was an abuser and was physically, verbally, mentally abusive to me. And so it was just a really hard situation. And I was falling in love with the Lord, but at the same time dealing with someone who was actually abusing me, and I just didn't understand that. Like, that was a difficult, okay, Lord, now I'm pursuing you, but yet I'm dealing with this in my home. And because of previous shame, and I'm like, I can't tell people that I'm going through this, and I sure as heck can't get divorced, because that just adds more shame. You're already somebody who has multiple marriages and people are judge you because of that. And so I stayed in that relationship for 3 years, and that almost killed me because my physical health got so bad that I was hospitalized multiple times, sometimes 6, 7 times in a year. And my own family like stepped in and said, this is not right. And so the village church stepped in, and 3 elders showed up at my house and had my husband removed from my home. And I just remember in that moment, like looking back, I'm so glad that I did know the Lord and I had been developing that relationship, because I was clinging to Psalms where it's like the Lord is close to the brokenhearted, because I'm like, how am I in this situation when now I'm pursuing you? Like I am doing what I'm supposed to be doing, and yet I've got a guy who's breaking my thumb, you know, like that doesn't compute to me. But you know, here was Helen, like, Amy, you know that God is still good even in bad times. And so I just prayed through that time, had to go down to the courthouse, filed for divorce, crying in the parking lot, like, why is this happening to me again? I just want to be married. Like, I want the marriage my parents had. And so really just not understanding why that was still happening and why those hardships were happening. But then really saying, okay, at this point, I'm just going to be a nun. Like that was literally what I told my friends. I said, it's just maybe everyone's cut out for marriage. Like my dad said, your picker is bad. Like no more picks. And so, yeah, I said, okay, fine. I'm done. Right. I'm just done. And so there was about a year of no relationship with anybody. And that's the first time in my life that had happened. And so my health got so much better in that time. And I saw that season of, okay, Lord, like, obviously I was so sick because of so much stress that I was under, but that didn't mean I still wasn't sick. You know, I still had a disease, but I just saw how, okay, stress affects that so much. And I think it was my dad actually told me that he didn't want me to be alone for the rest of my life. So I told him, fine, I'll go home and write out this impossible list of a man that doesn't exist. And I'll pray over that. Like, I'll pray over that list and see, like, if God has it. And I made the list, like, impossible. Like, I was like, he has to be a good girl dad. Both of his parents have to be alive and still married. And at our age, like, most people's parents, both of them are not still alive. I just thought I need someone who has seen a marriage that has been longevity, you know? And so I was writing all these things. And then when I was in a training class, Wade was sitting in front of me, and I knew of Wade because we worked for the same department, but I didn't know him. It's kind of funny because that's God too. But I knew of him, and there was a guy next to him who I did know, and I heard them talking about how they would never get remarried because they had like the worst of the worst divorces. And of course I was like, I got you beat. Like I got 3 down. I started comparing war stories, and so I found out Wade was raising 2 girls alone and that he had gotten full custody, which that never happens in Texas. And so he did have really bad war stories from his divorce, and we just started comparing stuff. But I was more fascinated by the fact that a man was raising 2 girls. I just had so many questions, like, what do you do if they're on their period? And he's like, I drop them off at the grocery store and I give them a credit card. I was like, okay.
Oh, wow. That's one way to handle that.
Yeah, I was like, I was like, who cooks your meals? Who does all this stuff? And so my daughter being an only child, I was like, I don't mind helping you. I'll come down. I'll take him to go get ice cream. And I looked at it more as an opportunity to mentor to his girls, because I had really started working I was leading recovery at church, and I was working with young girls, and I just loved doing that. And so I looked at it as, I'll step in here and help him with these girls. But the more I started to get to know Wade, I remember being like, man, Wade is checking all these boxes on my list, but there's no way. Like, there's just no way. And then one day he told me, yeah, both of my parents live in Fort Worth, and they live in the house that they raised me in. And Wade's 10 years older than me. So, I mean, his parents would be 10 years older. And so the fact that they're both still alive to this day. And I remember being like, okay, God, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? And so when I realized that Wade was checking all those boxes is when it was just a sweet moment for me, because I realized that the man I had prayed for was literally right in front of me. And so I was like, how do I tell him that? Because that'll totally freak him out, right? Like, oh, by the way, you and I are supposed to be married.
Did you just say?
I mean, we started dating, and then, I said, I need to tell you something. Like, I basically prayed for all these things. And one of them was, I don't want a man who turns his location off. Because my ex-husband would turn his location off for days and block my phone number while we were married in the same house. And so just this constant fear of what's he doing, where's he going? And Wade and I were not even like serious. And I told Wade that, and he said, yeah, my ex did the same thing. He said, and you know what? He goes, you can know where I am at any time. And he shared his location with me. And this was like our first or second date. And I remember being like, okay, yeah, I know where this guy is all the time. Like, he has no secrets. And so all that to say, when Wade and I got married, like, we realized that, and Wade said he knew pretty early on that something was different about me as well. I told my dad, I said, hey, I want to go on like a family dinner and bring a guy. And my dad said, oh, Lord, Amy. He goes, no, not again. And I was like, no, I made a list. I prayed over it, like, I want you to meet him before I move forward with this, because I never really got their approval on anyone before. And I had dinner with Wade and my dad and my brother. And when we left, my brother said, he's a keeper. And my dad was like, listen, if this one doesn't work out, we'll know that you're the problem, because we love Wade.
Oh, that's so funny.
Thanks, Dad. I was like, okay, got it. Good to know. But we got married, and right away, I mean, obviously you have to tell somebody that you're sick. And when you go places and they ask, like, what are your hobbies? I always write baths and doctor's appointments because I like live in a bathtub. I always take Epsom salt baths, like sometimes 3-4 times a day to soak. And, but I'm in doctor's offices. I mean, normally 2 to 3 times a week. Wow. And so having to tell Wade, and I've never had a person who even cared about it, never even asked to go to an appointment or do anything, and watching how the Lord has used Wade to really take care of me has just been really sweet, because I've never had that. And Wade started going to doctor's appointments with me, and he will, I have to have the big Sunday through Saturday pill container, and I have literally 2 months worth, because my medicine comes in like 2 months worth of pills. And so Wade will sort my medicine for me and fill the 2 months. That used to be, I'd have to take an hour out of my day to do that every 2 months. And so coming home and seeing that Wade had done all that for me, or when I've had to go to the hospital, because sometimes, Thanksgiving at a pie shop is pretty crazy.
Is it?
So just a little. So after Thanksgiving and Christmas, my body is done. Like, it is just, sometimes I've had to go into the hospital because I just wear myself down to nothing. And Wade has really been like, you need to slow down. You need to stay at home. You need to let me take care of you. And so all my friends know that, like, Wade every single night, like, does not miss a night. He packs me in with ice packs every night. I get 3, 1 on the back of my neck and 2 on my back. And he heats up a heating pad in the microwave every night, and I put that on my chest, and then he gives me a little bowl of frozen grapes. And he does that every single night. And one time, like probably 2-3 years into being married, I noticed that none of the grapes had stems on them, and I was like, Wade, why are there no stems on these grapes? And he said, I pick all the stems off for you every night. And I'm like, dude, I am so spoiled.
Wow.
But it's been like, this was the marriage that I had always wanted and didn't know I needed. But just to see like how Wade has taken such good care of me and like how much he loves me, it's really been a, picture of how God loves us, because like Wade's a human and has flaws, but like he loves me so much. I've even told him, like, sometimes you love me too much. Like, you really shouldn't love me this much. And he's always like, I adore you. He's like, Amy, do you know how much I love you? Like, there's no question about how much my husband loves me. And I've just seen how God has used him in the midst of being sick, because very rarely will I just break down and just have like a 5-minute cry session, because I'm not a crier. So that happens maybe once a year. And I just put my head in my pillow and I'm like, I'm so tired of being sick, because it's just there's just days where it's exhausting. And then the first time I did that, Wade was standing there. He goes, I don't know what to do right now. And I was like, it's okay. I'll be fine. but he's like, it hurts him that I'm sick. And he's always like, men are fixers. So it's like, he's like, I hate that I can't fix this for you. But just to be able to pray through a disease that is attacking my body, and knowing that, I was not designed by mistake. Like, we live in a sinful world and illness is a part of that. So just using that as a part of my testimony, that like, I long for a heavenly body, and I know one day like I'll have a body that doesn't hurt all the time, but it's allowed me to talk to people who do suffer with chronic pain, and like seeing where pushing through like those difficult times really does bring this endurance that like I can't explain why I'm sick. I don't know why this was the path that God chose for me, but it is a part of my story. And my youngest daughter sent me this clip from The Chosen, and it's where, I think it's James, where he was talking to Jesus, and he's crippled in the movie. And he says to Jesus, like, you're giving me the ability to heal people, but why don't you heal me? And man, I watched that, and, of course, my eyes teared up, and Jesus tells him, like, I knew that you could handle this, and I knew that, like, this would be a part of your story, and that, you can share that with other people. And so, like, to hear, like, I knew you could handle that, it just made me look at it in a different way. Like, God knew that I could handle this, and that I could use it to minister to people who might be suffering with the same thing. So,
yeah, healing, I think we think healing always is pretty, and it's tied up with a bow, but listening to your story, God's obviously healed so many parts of you, right? And then there's times where we're just like still like the physical why, but just, I mean, you are like the poster child for this Romans verse, talking about perseverance and character and hope, of just pushing through and just looking at the hope of Christ that is before you.
Right.
So I love that. I want to just jump back a little bit to, you were talking about how your mom lived her life and how she sent you clippings and all the things, and how none of that really like was the thing that pushed you, because God won't force himself on us. He just, he does these subtle little invitations, and he shows himself, and he gives us his glory in so many ways until we're just ready to yield and be open. And so because of our season of life, I think a lot of our listeners may also be in a season where they're watching someone in their family or a child who they want God's best for them so much, but that person isn't walking in God's best. And so talk a little bit about how we can encourage the people that we love, who we see aren't walking God's best for their life and aren't like pursuing the Lord and leaning into him. How can we encourage people and pray for them to get to that place without pushing?
Yeah. I definitely think that it's modeling that relationship with Jesus, because just like I said, like it was something I saw in my mom, not anything she tried to push over into me, but then also just like the praying for somebody and doing all the work kind of behind the scene. Because I do have firsthand experience with this, because when I met Wade, our oldest daughter was 16, and everyone's like, oh my gosh, you inherited 2 girls in their teens. Was that a nightmare? And I said, well, it wasn't a nightmare in the beginning, because they needed a mom and they were so happy to have somebody, and I ended up adopting them. So like they are now legally my children, but our oldest had so many seeds planted that were from her biological mom that taught her to drink, taught her to smoke weed. I mean, just all these things that you can't believe a parent would actually teach, but teaching how to deceive and lie. And so she never was disrespectful to me, like to my face, but I started catching her sneaking out, and I started catching her drinking. And then we figured out she actually has a drinking problem. And of course, I say to people, if anyone's ever talked to you about your drinking, you have a drinking problem. Because now we live in this, oh, I'm not an alcoholic, I don't drink every day, or I have a job, and it's not that. Like she was wrecking her car, and I mean, all under 21, so she shouldn't have been drinking to begin with, but just all these problems all the time. And it was just this constant season of our oldest always being in trouble. And so of course, trying to be like, okay, this is payback for everything I did to my mom, right? And I said, man, the roles have switched. Now I know what it's like to watch a daughter not pursue the Lord and not follow the Lord. And I'm thankful that our other two love Jesus. They've always pursued him. I was like, thank the Lord that I didn't get 3 out of 3 like that, but 1 out of 3 was plenty. But I just realized that there's nothing I can do to make her surrender. And every time I thought she was at her rock bottom, which would be most people's rock bottom, and she would come to church and check all the boxes and say she was sober, she would just fall right back. And I would have lots of conversations with her, and she would say, I'm trying to do better. I'm trying hard. And I'm like, that I get all that. You and I are the same person. I get it. And you're not going to get there. And so it ultimately resulted in us having to have her move out. And I mean, we sold her car her senior year. She rode the bus to school as a senior. We took a phone away. I mean, we were very disciplined on these are the consequences of that. But just nothing was working. And I started early on praying for her. I mean, from the day I met her, I started praying for her. But really, once she left our house, and you don't have control over them once they're out of your house. You probably don't have control of them when they're in your house. But it's just surrendering her to the world and what she wanted, and knowing that she was out doing everything the world wants you to do and just being broken. I just prayed for her. And I mean, I've told her to this day, if you go through, I'm a journaler. So I'm if you go through the last 6 years of my life, you will see your name in my journal daily. And so just every time I thought she was going to make a comeback, we'd be right back there. And so at the beginning of this year in January, she came to me and Wade and said, I'm miserable. Basically the same talk that I had walking into the village church. And she said, I want to be sober. I want to go to church, but I want to know who Jesus is. Wow. And I being totally transparent, I was like, we've been here. We've done this. I need to see this for about 2 years before I believe that this is real. But having to really wrestle with, okay, Lord, she is me. And if I resent her, then I really resent myself. Right. And so having to sit there and say, this is what I prayed for. I literally prayed for her to be doing this. And now I'm not recognizing that I prayed for the things that are happening. And so she has still been sober to this day. She actually moved back in with us, which I didn't think would ever happen. And Wade goes to his men's group on Tuesday nights, and she never works on Tuesdays. So I told her, okay, you and I are going to sit down and I'm going to teach you how to read your Bible. I'm going to be your Helen. And she is just soaking it all in and listening, and went to Transformation Tuesday at Valley Creek last night, church, and joined a small group. Wow. And so it's I'm seeing everything I prayed for. I got goosebumps, right? That's amazing. And that's where if I could give any advice to people for what do you do, it's you pray for them, and you really pray for them. But you also have to really know Jesus to know what he says and know what scripture says about praying and about the obedience in that, and about, endurance and having that. It could have been 30 years. I could have been praying for her. And, obviously I'm praying that what this is real and lasts. But I mean, I can definitely tell it's different than it's been in all the other times. But even she started saying oh, I'm so glad you didn't give up on me. And for Mother's Day, she gave me a card, and it said, hands down, you have prayed for me more than anyone else in my entire life. And I was like, okay, that makes it worth it, right? That's why we pray, is to see God show off, really, Yeah. And so just sticking with that and not giving up, because it could take 6 years. I've seen prayers answered the same day, right. But I also know that she is the longest prayer I've ever had. So just to stay faithful with that and know that I may never even see an answer on this side of heaven. And that's how I feel about healing. I still pray for healing. I know that's possible, but that may never come. So just being content in trusting that process.
Wow.
So that's awesome.
Love that, being faithful in prayer. So that in and of itself is just a great word. But if you think of, you know, someone who's listening or watching today that's like right in the middle of it, of just their hard place, their hard season, what would be just one small step that you would invite them to take today? Just something practical.
I started a prayer wall in my closet because I had like this one space of wall that I decided I took a bulletin board and I started putting just little note cards, and I would write someone's name on it, or I would write like a prayer or a verse or something. I would write it on there. And there are days where, when it, especially like physically, if I'm hurting, I just go into that closet and I just lay on my back so I can see it. And I just sit in there and I read the whole thing. And now above the bulletin board has pictures, you know, below it, one's like, be still. I mean, it goes literally now from the top of our ceiling to the floorboard. Wow. Wade's like, Amy, there's no more room on the wall. And I was like, trust me, there's always room. But it's just, you know, taking the time to kind of remove yourself from the world and social media and the internet and everybody, just isolating yourself and just having that time with the Lord to say, okay, like, I don't know what's happening. I don't know. It's okay to not be okay, right? Yeah. So just to go in and really have a place where you can pin up all your, like, I'm mad about this. I'm like, God already knows how we feel. Yeah. So I don't know why we try to hide that. So when there's bad stuff that happens, like there is a note card on my prayer wall that says, I'm tired of being sick. And I see that all the time. And that's just my reality. Like, I am tired of being sick. I wish I wasn't sick. But if God ever answers one of those prayers for me, I flip it over and I write the date, and then I leave the date and I put like prayer answered. And so it's been really cool to see the cards that are flipped around, because then I can flip them over and be like, yes. And there were several where it was like friends that I was praying for, and they didn't know I was praying for them. And when it got answered, I've stuck it in an envelope and I've mailed it to them. And I was like, just so you know, you were on my prayer wall. And so just seeing how God's used that just to make such an impact. And that started off as something so just like easy and a $1 note card pack, you know, and writing on the note cards what my prayers were, what verses were speaking out to me. And so, that's where, if I had to say like, where do you start? Is that's where I would start.
And that's great because it does two things. One, you know, like you said, it gets you into that place, remove all the noise, you and Jesus, pour your heart out for all your things. But then there's also like a turning point of, okay, and I'm going to pray for others. So yes, I'm going to bring the Lord my stuff, but then I can also though still pray for others and cry out for others, because there's a sense of healing, I think, in that, of like getting off of ourselves even when it's hard, and finding the strength to pray for somebody else. So I love that. That's amazing.
That's beautiful.
And I even bought stuff off Amazon that was already like pre-printed, you know, and one was like, I will walk with you through deep waters, and that's on the wall, you know. And so when times are hard, you know, I sit there and just stare at that picture, and I'm like, okay, I'm not by myself in this. Like, not only is the Lord in with me, but the people I'm doing life with, like, I can reach out to them and they'll pray for me and they will walk through this with me. I'm not by myself. That's why it's so important to have community. I mean, as you know, like, that's why you do life with people, is because we're not meant to be by ourselves here. So finding people that you can know are doing life like you are, and saying, hey, I need you to pray for me about this. And because I know how many people were praying for my oldest daughter. Like, it wasn't just me praying for her. I had small groups praying for her, and every week I had the same update, you know. There is no update. And so just knowing that I had friends faithfully praying through that. And I've told her, like, I wasn't the only person praying for you. Just know that you had like a team of people coming at you.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So
that's amazing. I recently heard a pastor say that the reason that life feels so hard to us sometimes is because we spend so much time putting Band-Aids on our symptoms instead of getting quiet before the Lord and letting His identity wash over us and fix the root of the problem, right? And so the symptoms may still look like they're out there, but when we sit in that space where He comes in and like settles inside of us and settles our hearts and our minds, which sounds like your prayer closet is like that space for you. And I just think that is so beautiful. That's amazing. Yeah. Awesome. That is awesome.
Well, As you know, around here, when we're talking about hard things, we always take a minute to turn to the great things that God is doing, even in the midst of the hard, that we find reasons to rejoice and to be thankful and to celebrate what he's doing. And so we just like to say how we're going to go enjoy the life that God has given us this week. So, Kara, how are you going to enjoy
Yeah, I'm super excited because this weekend, my husband and I actually were given gift certificates to get boots at a well-known boot store in Texas, Lucchese Boots, which I guess the whole country doesn't know about, because I was talking to someone from Colorado and she was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm like, these are good boots. Yeah. So anyway, we were given these gift certificates. So we're actually going to go to a hotel this weekend in Fort Worth, which is a big deal for Jeff, for him to like want to go to a hotel that's close to home. He's like wants to sleep in his own bed usually. So we're going to do that and go buy our boots, and it's just going to be a fun weekend. So I'm super excited about that.
Awesome.
Yeah. What are you going to do to enjoy the life?
So I have just a coffee scheduled at the end of this week with one of the young adult girls that I've known for a long time. Well, actually, fun story. Her dad and I went to high school together. Oh. And so he's like 4 years older than I am. So I didn't know him like super well. We were in technical theater together. And so then, we get to our church, Valley Creek Church, and find out, he and his wife are there, and super fun. And then they have 4 amazing kids. And so I've gotten one of their daughters has just kind of been in my, circle of life stuff for the last several years. And so it's just so fun because it's just so random that like I went to high school with your dad, and she's just super special. So I get to hang out with her a little bit this week, have coffee, catch up. She's busy, with all the things with life, and so catch up with her. So just a fun coffee.
Yeah.
Miss Amy, what are you gonna do this week?
I have a froyo date with one of my friends actually this evening, so that's exciting. She's like my fun friend she works for me at the pie shop too. Like she joined as my staff, as a friend of mine, but she's my friend at Christmas that will wear like the Christmas ornaments that light up and the little headbands and all that. So she always messages and says, want to meet up for ice cream? And I'm like, you literally are like 12. You're so much fun. So I'm doing that. And then we are pet sitting a dog. And so I love dogs and get to love on that. But going into next week, Wade and I are going to go on a little empty nester trip to Charleston, because that's where we honeymooned and we love Charleston. So just a little check out and get off our phones and just be together. I'm really excited about that because we love doing stuff like that.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's the good part about empty nest life.
I know.
The trips.
I know. It's just
you take your kids if you want, and then you don't have to if you don't want to.
And then the girls will we won't tell them we're doing something like that, but then we get there and we take a picture. Like we went to Las Vegas once and there's that sign, welcome to Vegas, when you get there. And so we took it and sent it to the girls and they're like, y'all are in Vegas? And I was like, yeah, we really love being empty nesters.
Yeah.
So it's just been fun.
That's awesome.
I love that.
Great. Okay, well, until next week.
Yes.
That's why we're friends.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks so much for spending time with us today on That's Why We're Friends.
We hope you laughed, felt encouraged, and are walking away with a little more hope for your day.
If you love this episode, make sure to follow the podcast so you never miss what's next.
And share it with a friend who needs a little encouragement, because that's why we're friends.
Some products or services we mention may be paid promotions. Any advice shared should be confirmed with a qualified professional. Our conversations and opinions are meant for encouragement and entertainment only.